Barry Neale again here, and in this short video I want to cover what I consider to be one of the most useful things that you can learn when you're working with a client to understand where you are in the process and where you need to go. And it's something that comes out of NLP. One of the things about NLP was that the founders of NLP looked at some of the top therapists of the day and looked at what they were doing. And they didn't just look at what they were doing from what they were saying, but they looked at the context and the process and the structure of what they were doing. And they identified certain principles that seemed to underlie virtually all types of therapy. Regardless of what type of therapy it is, there was certain things that were going on at the context, process and structure level that seemed to be there in virtually every therapeutic modality. And certainly the sort of large percentage of NLP patterns and patterns in hypnosis and many other therapy modalities follow this underlying principle. And if you understand this, then you can not only know where you are in any situation when you're working with a client, but you can create new patterns, new techniques on the fly. And so it's really, really useful to understand. And I say it really underlies virtually all NLP patterns and a lot of the hypnosis patterns and many other therapy patterns as well. So it's a really useful thing. And so it's also a good idea to understand, because you get people say, oh no, my pattern's better than your one and this technique's better than that one. In fact is, they pretty much all follow the same underlying pattern. So when you understand this, you don't need to go off on all these other courses, because you realize it's exactly the same thing. So the first step is, when you're working with a client, is you have to associate them to the problem. So step one is associate to problem. Now this is really important, particularly what's been discovered in the recent years with neurology. If you study something like havening, there's a lot of research now that shows that when the person associates to the problem, all these brain chemicals fire off and they kind of unlock the trauma or the event or whatever. So it really is crucial that step one, when a client comes in, is that you associate them to the problem. And I don't want to sort of bang on about this, but this is another issue that I have with scripts, is a person might come in and they say, right, okay, I've got a phobia of X, or I need confidence. And the person will pull out their trusty confidence script or their phobia script, hypnotize the person. There they are, nice and relaxed. And then the person reads the script. Now, my question is, if they're nice and relaxed in this hypnosis, are they at that point associated to the problem? No, it's not there at all. They're the total opposite. If someone's highly anxious and then you have them relax into a deep trance, we'll talk about that later, they are the total opposite of associated to the problem. And the two things, and if you come up with a solution, it's highly unlikely that the two things are going to become linked together. So step one in virtually every successful therapeutic interaction is you have to associate the client to the problem. Even if it's only for a second or so, you have to associate them to the problem. Then step two is that then you want to dissociate them from the problem. Now, this is obviously important, because if they are fully associated to the problem, then you're not going to get much done, because they're going to be stuck in the problem. And so you need to then have the skill of either be able to interrupt the pattern or change your state, change their state, to dissociate them from the problem. And as we'll talk about in a minute, most therapeutic techniques have this built in. Like things like regression, things like that, have this built into the process. So step two is you need to dissociate them from the problem. Then what you want to do is to associate them to the resources. So at this point, obviously, when someone's got a problem, they're coming in to feel better. So you've got to come up with the resources that they need for the problem situation. so that they can do whatever it is they need to do and to get through that situation. So step 3 is to associate them to the resources that they need. And you can do that in many, many different ways. But the key is they have to be fully associated to the resource. Having them just think about maybe being confident, you say to them, well, how do you want to be? And they go, confident. They're not associated to the feeling of confidence. So you have to have them fully associate to the resources that they need, and that the resources that you associate them to are stronger than the emotion in the problem, because you're going to use that to collapse the old problem. Then step 4 is to associate the resources to the problem. So in this situation then, is you've accessed the resources in the client, there they are, they're feeling confident, they're feeling excited, they're feeling loved, whatever it is. And then what you want to do is you want to take those feelings and then have them think about the problem context in some way, and the two then become linked together. And then if necessary, you might have to recycle through that a number of times to build more resources so that the resources are strong enough to deal with the problem. So it's this 4th step is really, really important, is that you associate the resources to the problem. And ideally, that you need to associate the resources to whatever it is that triggers the problem. Now, again, this is one of the things that falls down on people with scripts, is that they could have the person in hypnosis, they read them, like for example, they're talking about confidence, and they read them this wonderful, really motivational script about being confident, and the person is, yeah, I'm really confident, feeling really, really good. But if they don't then take that feeling and associate it to the problem context, then all you've done is a state change in the moment. And this is a sort of thing that often happens if you go to one of these like motivational seminars, like say a Tony Robbins seminar. You get really pumped up for those 2 or 3 days that you're at the seminar, and you're really, really good. But unless you associate all those good feelings to the context, the problem context is where you need them, 2 or 3 days after the seminar, you'll go, well, that was good, but nothing's changed. So you have to associate the resources to the problem. And many of you who may have been accustomed to this process may have seen this process before, but there's one step that keeps getting missed out. Whenever I see this, people say, oh yes, you've got to do the meta pattern. There's one step that they keep missing out, and that is step 5. And that is you have to associate the resources to the future. In other words, a future pace. So you have to, once you've done all this, once you've associated them to problem, dissociate them from the problem, associate them to the resources, then associate the resources to the problem, you've done that bit, but then you need to future pace it. Future pacing is such a useful thing to do, because what you're doing then is you're taking this positive state out into the future, and you're going to pick up all the other triggers that you may not have picked up when you've done the first bit of elicitation. So future pacing is really, really important. So once I've done this point, I'm going to future pace, and I'm going to test, and I'm going to test, and if any new words come up that are hot words for them, I'll start introducing that. And what that does, it starts building recursion. And that's how the brain learns anyway. So you really need to future pace everything. So let's just go back and look at some of the, so I said this pretty much underlies most therapeutic models. So certainly in NLP, if you've got something like the collapse anchors, it's really simple. You associate the person to the problem and you anchor it on, say, one shoulder or one knee or one hand. Then you dissociate from the problem, so you do a pattern interrupt. Then you associate them to the resources. Sort of, okay, can you remember a time when you felt wonderful? You remember a specific time, you associate them to the problem and you anchor that. Then you associate the resource to the problem. You fire the positive anchor on top of the negative anchor, so you fire both at the same time. That associates the resource to the problem, and then you would future pace. But what about other techniques like maybe age regression? There's obviously a big debate in the hypnosis world about age regression. Some people love it, some people hate it. But if you understand what's going on, it's the same process. Step one in age regression, you have the person and then you stir up the emotion. You know, in a moment I'm going to count from 10 down to 1, that feeling's going to come stronger and stronger. 10, 9, 7, getting stronger and stronger, building up within you, all the way down to 1. What have you done there? You've associated with the problem. And you have them then track back to supposedly the significant emotional event that caused it. Yeah? But then you have them either float above that event, or you have them come back to now as the adult and look at that event. What is that stage? That's dissociating them from the problem. Then you have them associate to the resources. So it could be, you know, okay, so you were a lot older than that you were when you were 3 years old. You learned many things that that 3-year-old didn't know. What I want you to do now is to go back and tell that 3-year-old whatever they need to know so they can get through that problem without it being a big issue. What's that? That's associating them to the resources. Then you say, okay, so they've done that, and then you have the child, so in a moment you're going to go through that event, but this time you'll know you're going to survive that. You know you're going to get through that. 1, 2, 3. They go through that. What is that? That's associating the resource to the problem. And then, typically, once you've done that, you will then future pace them out into the future to situations where in the past they would have felt that old way. It's the same in the NLP allergy treatment. It's the same in the NLP phobia model. It's the same in so many different things. So if you understand this process now, you can be working with a client and you associate to the problem, you straight away you do that, you know you've got to dissociate them. Yeah? And then you can associate them to the resources. So you can start making up techniques on the fly. Technique like kinetic shift. This follows the same process. Again, you associate to the problem. You pull that problem out. What are you doing at that point? You're dissociating them from the problem. Then you're doing the eye movement bits. Then you're doing the other resources of pushing in the new colour on the new feeling. That's, again, associating the resources to the problem. So all these different therapy techniques pretty much follow the same underlying pattern. And if you know this, you don't have to keep going off on new courses, learning new stuff, because you know it's all going to be some sort of version of this. And if you know that, then you can start creating your own patterns that fit your own style of working. It works with metaphors as well. What happens in a metaphor? You know, you have the person experiencing the problem, they feel really bad, but then they go for a walk in the woods. What's that doing? Dissociating from the problem. But then they meet the wizard, and the wizard takes them through this process, which associates them to resources. Then you do that and that. So metaphor therapy follows the same pattern. So you can use this in any and all situations. And that means you have real freedom. You don't have to be sitting there looking at thinking, right, what are the steps in this particular process? Because all you need to do is to follow this in your head. You only got 5 things to remember. You can remember 5 things really easily, and you'll know where you are at any step. And if you combine this with what I mentioned on the other videos of sensory acuity and state elicitation, you've got a whole package where you can create your own techniques on the fly, and you can create changes much, much quicker than you could before, because you know what step you need to be at in the future when you're working with a client. So what I recommend that you do is just make a note of those. Just think, right, okay, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, write that down, pin it on your wall somewhere so that you remember it. It's only 5 steps, it will be easy. And then when you start working with clients, just follow that process. You don't have to get it right every time, but as long as you think, hang on a minute, I missed that step, go back and do it. You'll be absolutely fine. So I hope this helps. I hope this gives you a few ideas of how you can structure your therapy, and hopefully you'll be able to use this really, really easily and get better and better results. So I'll see you soon.